then maybe 30 seconds of it, and it was gone. Joe opened his eyes and he looked at me and he said, "Steve, I will never disbelieve anything you tell me." I said, "Well, thank you."
Bigfoot, a 50-year journey come full circle. Written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose, and we are on chapter 25, entitled The Exodus. I was anxious to start bringing my team members up to the new and improved Southern Oregon Interaction Area, or SOIA. First, since she lived locally, I brought Jill Ligda with me. We explored the area thoroughly and found several tracks in the ground. As we walked a logging road, we came across a very fresh, steaming hot to the touch, 3-foot Bigfoot turd. How do I know that the 3-foot turd belonged to a Bigfoot forest person? Well, it was surrounded by 2 26-inch tracks on both sides of the stool. That was a dead giveaway. I was pretty sure that a squirrel didn't leave it behind. Guess what? I now have a 3-foot shellacked Bigfoot turd in my possession that I proudly show off in a display case next to a pile of shellacked black bear scat for a means of comparison. There's a night and day difference between the two samples. I know it sounds pretty crappy, but it's the best I can do. Next, I was excited to bring Cynthia up to SOIA. She had some time off and didn't want to wait very long to see the new area that I had been guided to. We spent 2 nights out in SOIA. During the first night, we played the music, sang songs, talked, laughed, and Cynthia played her flute. We had the usual activity of bipedal walking, silhouettes, eye glow, vocals, and tree knocks. Eventually, we went to bed. In the middle of the night, while I was sleeping, I was dreaming about being visited by Onks at SOIA. During the dream, Onks introduced me to his uncle, who was the clan leader. In my dream, Onks was passing me on to him, since I was in his area. Also, his uncle had his very large hand on my head. His palm was at the base of my skull, and his fingers were reaching over the top of my head and touching my forehead. He was gently squeezing my head off and on in a kind of caring manner. It was a very affectionate gesture. When I woke up from my dream, I still felt the very large hand on my head, gently squeezing off and on in an affectionate manner. As usual, I had a hoodie over my head, and my eyes were covered with a t-shirt. Suddenly, the uncle leaned over me and gently whispered in my ear in a deep, bass, squatchy tone of voice, "Zorth." I asked in my mind, "Is Zorth your name?" He responded, "Yes." I said, "It's nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting us to be here." Zorth said, "You're welcome. Thank you for being willing to help us." I couldn't wait to tell Cynthia all about it when she woke up later on. During our second night at SOIA, while Cynthia was standing up in the middle of the base camp playing her flute, we both saw Zorth walk into camp. He stood at the 11 o'clock position on the perimeter and listened to Cynthia playing her flute. His cloaked, shimmering image, much like the image in the Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator movie, stood about 10 feet tall. He was very broad-shouldered and buff. Cynthia and I both said hello to Zorth. After he left the base camp, we both described seeing the exact same thing. Afterwards, we took our juju that we obtained from the Oregon House of Mystery earlier that day and started to explore the perimeter of the SOIA base camp. We came across a spot that behaved in the same manner as the portal did in Soha. We saw sparkling lights and a fog of light appeared. It was incredible and very beautiful. I shared an amazing time in SOIA with Cynthia. It was so amazing that I wanted everyone on the planet to experience it. However, that obviously isn't going to be possible because I simply can't bring everyone who wants to come with me to Soya. I really do want to, but I simply just can't do it. Every day, I receive emails and Facebook personal messages from individuals. Some of them simply thank me for being so open and honest regarding the reporting of my research data online. They enjoyed the Team Squatch and USA YouTube videos and SoundCloud audio files. Others want me to consult with them about how to improve their research so they can increase their visuals and interactions. Finally, several people always ask me if I'll take them to my research area because they would like to see and interact with a Bigfoot forest person. If I had my way, I would take everyone to my research area because I'm all about sharing and educating the public. In my heart of hearts, I'm truly a come one, come all type of person. Matter of fact, Cynthia continually tells me to say no to people. Yet, nothing thrills me more than to see the people that I do bring along with me enjoy their first experience. It's like watching the kids on Christmas morning every time. It never gets old. However, if there's one thing that I've learned over the past 17 years, it's that people can be untrustworthy. People will smile to your face while they knife you in the back. They will swear on their mother's grave that they will respect my wishes for them not to return to my research area on their own without me. They will promise to never tell anyone where my research area is located. Then they will turn around and bring a carload of people to explore my area. Therefore, over the years, I've learned to say the following magical word: no. See? Cynthia's having a very positive influence on me. Simply put, I'm no longer willing to risk my 17 years of work so one bad apple can mess it all up for me again and again. I lost my first 3 research areas because I was being too nice of a guy. That's exactly why I share my research data online so people can learn from what I've been doing and then replicate my research methods in their own areas back home. Those that actually take the time to learn and implement what I've been teaching online experienced increased visuals and interactions as promised. In short, there's no need for people to come to the Southern Oregon interaction area, Soya. They can develop their own interaction area back home. Just read the testimonial letters at the end of the book and you'll see I'm telling the truth. The problem is that some people don't want to put forth the blood, sweat, and tears to reach their goals. They want to take the shortcut to the top. Only a few privileged individuals get that opportunity to come to Soya. They have to be a special person to accompany me. I have to vet them with a million questions and feel that confirmation in my heart that they're okay to bring along with me before I ever say yes to them. I've turned away many, many people, including the Finding Bigfoot TV crew. One day, another email inquiry arrived in my inbox. I opened it up because I try to read and answer all of my emails. It's the courteous thing to do. As I read through this particular email from a guy named Steve Bachman, he was very complimentary, and he told me that he was from Buckley, Washington. That got my attention because Buckley is a stone's throw away from Puyallup, Washington. Next, Steve told me about his vocation as a contractor and how he had been working with his hands his entire life. Finally, he shared with me that he likes to tinker around with projects on the side, like refurbishing antique tractors and building unique devices. He shared with me that he used Tesla's design to build an electromagnetic pulsating device and attached a picture to the email message. Well, Both his kind-hearted personality and the picture of the electromagnetic device got my attention immediately. Perhaps this was what I've been waiting for in order to help the Bigfoot forest people create a shunt for the portal. I called Steve immediately, and I think I caught him off guard. I don't think he expected to ever hear from me. Yet there we were, talking with one another and getting to know each other. I don't think he realized it, but I was vetting him during our phone conversation. I don't believe in coincidences, and I told him so. Therefore, I chose to tell him about the Bigfoot Forest people's request for me to assemble a team and help create a shunt. Near the end of our conversation, I asked Steve if he wanted to join Mike McCade and me for 3 nights in Soya near the end of June. He sounded shocked and very pleasantly surprised and agreed to come along. I asked him to leave his electromagnetic pulsating device at home. I just wanted him to meet the Bigfoot Forest people family in Soya first and allow them to get to know him. The day before Steve was to come to Soya, I called just to check up on him and make sure that he was properly prepared. There's nothing worse than driving 400 miles to your destination only to realize that you left something very important behind. I've done that before a few times. It sounded like Steve had everything in order and was ready and willing to go. Before we hung up, he asked me if he could bring his electromagnetic pulsating device along just to show it to Mike and me. He didn't want to turn it on. He just wanted us to see it and explain it to us. I thought that was a good idea and asked him to bring it along. The next day, keeping with tradition, Steve, Mike, and I met at the Black Bear Diner on 6th Street in Grants Pass, Oregon. We enjoyed a meal together and got to know one another face to face. I was prepared to send Steve back home immediately if he turned out to be anyone other than who he was painting himself out to be. Well, my sixth sense was correct. He was a sweetheart of a guy and very sincere in his desire to learn about the Bigfoot Forest people. He also wanted to help them in any way possible. He is truly one of those salt-of-the-earth type guys. After filling our bellies, we left for the Albertsons grocery store on the south side of the Rogue River. We purchased our supplies for the evening along with fresh food for breakfast on the following morning. Finally, we drove through the Dutch Brothers coffee stand so I could caffeinate my body for a late night in Soya. With goodies in hand, we proceeded to drive to our destination. Once we arrived in Soya, we set up camp. After the chairs, table, bins, porta-potty, and sleeping cots were in their proper places, we took a tour of Soya. Then I enjoyed a rest in the camping chair while Mike and Steve did their own thing. They checked out the area and enjoyed getting to know one another. After it got dark, I sent Mike and Steve out on a mission. I informed them that Cynthia and I had been up to Soya a few weeks earlier. I told them that we had gone to the Oregon House of Mystery and brought the Juju back with us to Soya. Finally, I shared with them that we explored the perimeter and found an area where a portal might be. I asked Mike and Steve to walk the perimeter and see if they could find the spot that Cynthia and I had previously found. After 2 sweeps of the perimeter, they turned up empty-handed. Quite frankly, that was to be expected since they didn't have the Juju with them. I told Mike and Steve that we would be going to the Oregon House of Mystery on the following day, and then they could try it again with the Juju. They thought that was a good idea. I began to play my music on my MP3 player and portable Bose speaker for the Bigfoot Forest people family. I also sang several songs to them. I could tell that Steve was getting tired. After all, he had left his home around 3 in the morning in order to meet Mike and me on time at the Black Bear Diner. Steve went to bed while Mike and I stayed up a while longer. I'm sure Steve thought I was crazy and probably unsure about what he had just got himself into. As usual, there was activity on the perimeter of the Soya base camp: bipedal steps, vocals, tree knocks, silhouettes, and eye glow. Eventually, Mike and I went to bed too. Early the next morning, while it was still fairly dark, I was woken up by some very loud stomps on the ground on the other side of the bushes and trees. I'm talking 26-inch size stomping feet belonging to Zorth. The stomping was followed by a black bear grunting back at Zorth. He stomped his feet again and ran toward the black bear to intimidate it to leave. The bear snorted again, turned around, and ran off into the forest. Zorth walked back to the perimeter as I could see his massive shoulders, head, and glowing red eyes through a gap in the vegetation. I asked Zorth in my mind, "Was that you? You're keeping us safe at night, right?" He responded, "That was me. You're safe." I fell back to sleep. After the sun rose later that morning, Mike, Steve, and I woke up and discussed the stomping as we laid there in our sleeping bags. I explained to them that it was Zorth, and he had told me what he had done on our behalf to keep us safe. Afterwards, Steve proceeded to tell Mike and me all about the healing that he underwent for most of the evening. Apparently, when Steve went to bed, within a short time he had healing hands and energy all over his body. They worked on him from head to toe for most of the night. Steve told me that he had to put into practice what I had told him. He said that I would have been proud of him because he was a Navy SEAL and as strong as steel. He did not freak out during the experience. I was very proud of him. Later on that morning, we left for a tour of the Oregon House of Mystery, otherwise known as the Oregon Vortex. We enjoyed the 1-hour tour and left with our juju intact. Then I drove Mike and Steve up to the Crater Lake National Monument Park. It was a beautiful day. I never grow tired of visiting the park with my guests. The expressions on their faces when they first see Crater Lake for the very first time are priceless. Afterwards, we enjoyed our Mexican meal at Miguel's Guadalajara restaurant in Shady Cove, Oregon. The deck overlooks the Rogue River, and the view is mesmerizing. We drove back to Grants Pass, Oregon, and stopped once again at the Albertsons grocery store for our evening supplies and fresh food for breakfast the following morning. I drove through the Dutch Brothers coffee stand to acquire my coffee fix, and then we were back on the road to Soya. When we arrived, the guys wanted to do a walkabout while I enjoyed a rest in my camping chair in the middle of the base camp. I get tired after driving my guests around all day long. After the sun went down, I challenged both Mike and Steve to take another stroll around the perimeter and try to find the portal area that Cynthia and I found a few weeks earlier. I remained seated in the dark in the middle of the base camp because I didn't want to influence them one way or the other. Suddenly, Mike and Steve called me over to the same exact spot that Cynthia and I had found a few weeks earlier. Mike asked proudly, "Is this it?" I responded, "Yup. It most certainly is. Great job, guys." As we were standing there and enjoying the same sparkling lights and the fog of light, we suddenly heard a 900-pound owl sound off from the top of the hill adjacent to the base camp area. The elevation rises about 150 feet higher than the base camp area. We stood there and listened to the owl impression repeat itself over and over again. Eventually, the very poor owl impersonations were ending in a barking sound. We just stood there in the dark with our jaws dropped. To be quite honest, as I can recall, it sounded very much like what Miss Andrea Billups and I heard up in Soha during October of 2015. As suddenly as the sounds began, they stopped. We walked back in the dark to the center of the base camp and sat down in our chairs. We were all excited, and Mike started saying, "Let's go up there. Let's go up to the top of the hill." Steve let out an enthusiastic, "Yes, let's do it." I was about to agree with them when Zorth engaged in mind speak with me. He said, "No, do not come up here tonight. However, you're all invited to come up here and sit before the Council of 12 tomorrow night." I repeated to Mike and Steve what Zorth had just said to me, and we were all three excited about tomorrow evening. Wow, sit before the Council of 12. What an awesome invitation. As usual, I played a lot of music and sang some songs. Steve was now 100% bona fide believer that I've been telling the truth about my experiences in Soha and Soya. He was telling me that he already believed me after watching my YouTube videos, but being there in Soya and experiencing everything firsthand with his own eyes and ears was the icing on the cake. He expressed a genuine desire that everyone could experience what he was experiencing in Soya. He understood why that wasn't possible, but nevertheless, he genuinely wanted to spread the love. That's the kind of guy Steve is. Eventually, we all grew tired and went to bed. The next morning, after the three of us woke up, we shared what we had experienced during the night. We all heard walking around our cots during the middle of the night. I had a Bigfoot forest person squatting down at the head of my sleeping cot for a little while. I could hear him breathing and shifting his weight around. Stephen reported that once again he experienced healing hands of energy working all over his body from head to toe during most of the night. This time he was totally relaxed and didn't need to be a Navy SEAL as strong as steel because he knew they weren't going to hurt him. We ate our breakfast in camp, packed up, and drove off the mountain for another day of sightseeing. This time I was taking my guests to see the redwood forest near the California coast. The Stout Grove is a very impressive place to visit. We took lots of pictures and then enjoyed eating lunch afterwards. Needless to say, the three of us were very excited to return to the Soya base camp because on our third night there, we were going to hike up to the top of the hill and sit before the Council of 12 after the sun disappeared. We returned to the base camp around 7:30 p.m. I was exhausted from driving and told the guys that I needed to take a power nap for an hour before we hiked up to the top of the hill. I asked Mike to make sure that I was awake by no later than 8:45 p.m. That would still allow us enough daylight to hike up the hill. Mike agreed to wake me up. As soon as I lay down on my sleeping cot, I was catapulted into a vision. I was soaring about 200 feet above a beautiful lush green forest. I kept flying and saw nothing but green trees. Then I made my way over to a coastline. As I was flying up the coast, I noticed the beautiful blue ocean, blue sky, and the lush green forest. Suddenly, I noticed that the blue sky was starting to turn red. At first, I thought that was the sun merely setting. But then I noticed that the beautiful lush green forest was slowly transforming into dark, scraggly vegetation. Then I heard Zorth say in my mind, "This is our home world, and we need your help." After the vision was over, I slept until it was time to wake up. At 8:45 p.m., I was up and ready to go. I told Mike and Steve about my vision. We grabbed our camping chairs and took a couple of flashlights with us. It was light enough on the way up to the top of the hill that we didn't need to use the flashlights. However, we most certainly were going to need the flashlights when we walked back down the hill in order to avoid tripping on rocks, branches, and stumps. When we reached the top of the hill, Zorth told me where to set up the chairs. I pointed to a spot and told Mike and Steve that we need to set up the chairs over there by the trees. Mike asked, "Are you sure this is where we're supposed to set them up?" I responded. Yes, that's where Zorth just told me to set up our chairs. After we set them up, we walked around the top of the hill and enjoyed the 360-degree panoramic views. It was a beautiful evening. As the sun was slowly setting, we noticed the mountainsides across the valley. There were tiny pinpricks of light popping and flashing all over the place. It almost looked like a Christmas light display. Then I was asked to take some pictures, so I did. Finally, as we were sitting there in the dark waiting for the Council of 12 to arrive, Zorth began to interact with me. As I sat there in the dark with Mike and Steve, Zorth pulled up a memory of my being in the northern Cascade Mountains with Lori Simmons. We had gone to her research area that she took over after her father had passed away. Her goal was to further his research in the area in memory of her father. She had a very unique situation in her research area where she thought a Bigfoot was dwelling in the ground underneath a very large tree. I know, that sounds crazy, right? But then again, after all of my experiences in Soha and Soya, I'm living in a world that's beyond crazy. I'm living a science fiction novel, except it's all really happening. We parked my Suburban and then walked over to her tree. I convinced her to walk up the hill and go on the other side of a very large tree. Fortunately, I was carrying my bionic ear parabolic microphone dish and Sony digital recorder with me, and I recorded everything I'm about to tell you. As we approached the tree, I recorded 2 of the Bigfoot forest people talking to one another. Once we got on the other side of the tree, I was standing on the ground next to it while Lori was standing on a log about 10 feet away. I encouraged Lori to step off the log and come closer to the tree. She refused to do so because she was very scared. I walked over to her, gently put my arm around her waist, and pulled her off of the log and onto the ground. When I did that, her anxiety shot through the roof. When her anxiety shot through the roof, the tree growled at me, literally growled at me. It was amazing. Lori started sweet talking to the big guy and letting him know that she was okay. Apparently, when he heard that she was okay, we started hearing very fast tapping from inside the tree. I told Lori that I wanted to conduct a little experiment and received her permission to do so. I told her that I wasn't making a move on her, but I just wanted to see how the tree would react. Once again, I gently put my arm around her waist and slowly pulled her even closer to the tree. Once again, her anxiety shot through the roof. As a result, the tree growled at me again. I recorded everything, and it's there on SoundCloud.com for you to listen to for yourself. This one thing was clear to me. The noise was not coming from the ground underneath the tree. Rather, the tapping and growling noises were coming from directly inside the tree itself. Then Zorth brought back another memory for me while I was sitting in the dark with Mike and Steve. He reminded me of sitting in my office and answering the phone. At the other end of the line was John Eric Beckshard. Although he was a member of Mensa, he was the most socially inept Bigfoot researcher that I ever had the privilege of crossing paths with. He would call my office 25 to 50 times per day, trying to trick my secretary in allowing him to speak with me. If he got lucky and was patched through to me, as soon as I answered the phone, he would be screaming at the top of his lungs. "They're in the trees, Matt. They're in the trees." I would tell him to please get back on his medications and then hang up on him. After raising the memories of Lori and John Eric, Zorth asked me to count the trees in front of me from my left to my right. I counted inside my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Zorth asked me to count the trees again, so I did. I arrived at the same number as before. There were 12 trees in front of me. Then Zorth's mind spoke to me. We're in the trees. I thought to myself, oh my goodness, John Eric Beckchard was right. They're in the trees. Zorth then proceeded to tell me, we are beings of light. We are the orbs. We live in the trees during the daylight. That is how we rejuvenate ourselves. We take in the energy from the sun as well as the nutrients from the ground through the roots. We produce Gvianchaka in return to assist the trees. We have a symbiotic relationship with the trees. We are guardians of the forest and protect all who dwell within. Zorth continued, we can transform into anything we want to be. We can be a deer, bear, cougar, wolf, raven, or squirrel. We can be anything we want to be. We came over from our dying planet during the time of your dinosaurs. We've been here on the earth longer than the human race. Eventually, we chose to shapeshift into an upright, bipedal, hairy, human-looking hominid in order to get the attention of the human race. If we were a deer, we would just be another deer to you. I sat there in amazement, listening as Zorth continued. We all come from the same God. Our souls are the same. We are all beings of light. We just have different bodies. However, the human race rebelled against God and sinned in the Garden of Eden. They fell from God's grace. We never fell. We never rebelled against God. That is why we keep our distance from most humans, because they are self-centered and mean-spirited. They are not kind to one another. They steal, rape, and kill one another. They go to war with one another. They do not take care of God's creation. We are only interested in interacting with kind humans with good hearts and open minds. We all go back to God after we die. Zorth then told me, the Council of 12 consists of 2 elders from each habitable continent on the earth. I am the leader of the Council of 12. We are humbled to be here in your presence. We are grateful for your diligence throughout the years and your willingness to help our people. Thank you. I sat there thinking to myself, dang, the Council of 12 consists of 2 elders from each habitable continent, and Zorth is the leader of the council? That means that he's like the president of Earth. Wow. Who needs the president of the USA when I have the ear of Zorth? Finally, Zorth asked me, will you please ask your friends to count the trees in front of them from their left to their right? Ask them to count silently to themselves. I delivered the message to both Mike and Steve. They both arrived at the same conclusion. There were 12 trees in front of us. All of a sudden, they simultaneously stated, they're in the trees. I responded, that's correct, and then proceeded to tell them everything that Zorth had just shown me and told me. This was an amazing experience. You can't make this stuff up. I know that some of you think I did make this stuff up, but this is the truth, a truth that I freely share with you. Zorth told me, you may now return to your camping area with your friends. Thank you for visiting with us. I informed both Mike and Steve that it was time to return to the Soya base camp. We folded up our camping chairs and carried them back down the hill as we used our flashlights in order to prevent one or more injuries along the way. Needless to say, when we reached the center of the base camp, we were totally stoked. We were so excited that we couldn't stop processing what had just occurred. Then Mike got the idea and started asking Zorth some questions. I asked Zorth, and he said it would be okay to ask him questions. Mike asked, and Zorth answered. Mike asked more questions, and Zorth provided more answers. After a while, I said, "Wait a minute. I feel stuck in the middle here between the two of you." Mike joked with me about using me as a squatchy talkie with Zorth. I asked if we could be done, and Mike agreed. You have to remember that Mike is the extremely intelligent computer geek who is constantly sifting through the data to make sure that everything is legitimate. He calls it debugging the data. More often than not, he's usually so into his head that it's a challenge for him to be sensitive to what his heart is trying to tell him. Mike helps to keep things real. Actually, Mike and Cynthia are a lot alike. They both like to debug and help me keep things real. It's just my opinion that Cynthia is prettier than Mike. Since it was our third and final night in Soya, Steve asked me if he could power up his electromagnetic pulsating device. I asked Zorth, and he said yes. Steve set up the device on the tailgate of his pickup truck. Essentially, it consisted of two 12-volt deep-cycle marine batteries joined together to produce 24 volts of energy. These two batteries were hooked up to a very large inverter with a LED display to show the charge of the joint batteries. The inverter was hooked up to the electromagnetic pulsating device that Steve had made from a Nikola Tesla design. The device has a large wheel with 16 very powerful magnets. As the device spins around at a very high velocity, it creates free energy. It also sends energy back to the inverter and onto the batteries, so they never lose their charge. In theory, the device can run forever without ever draining the two batteries while creating free energy at the same time, i.e., perpetual motion. Steve fired up the device, and we returned to our camp chairs in the middle of the base camp. Immediately, we heard heavy-footed running from the forest to the back of Steve's truck. Then the heavy-footed running went from the back of Steve's truck back out into the woods. Suddenly, Zorth mind spoke with me and said, "It's working! We are able to keep the portal open. Souls are coming through the portal." I told Steve and Mike, and we were all excited. Eventually, Steve got tired and went to bed. He had to drive all the way back to Buckley, Washington on the next day so he could complete a work project on time. Mike and I stayed up a little longer. As time passed, Zorth was keeping me up to speed regarding the souls that were coming through the portal from their homeworld to Earth. Suddenly, the inverter started buzzing, an irritating high-pitched noise. Mike and I walked over to it and saw that the batteries were losing their charge. We shut off the inverter. Zorth said to me, "We were able to get approximately 2,350 souls through the portal tonight. That's about 10% of everyone who needs to come over." I responded, 10%? Really? That means there's only about 23,500 souls to bring over. That's not even the population of Grants Pass, Oregon. Zorth replied, "You are correct. However, you need to remember that our planet has been dying for a long time, and that we would be doing this even if only one soul was left. Thank you for your efforts." Eventually, Mike and I went to bed. We were exhausted, too. The next morning, Steve asked, "Who turned off the device?" Mike said that he did because the inverter was screaming at us due to the fact that the batteries were draining. Steve said, "That's impossible. I've tested that machine over and over again in my workshop, and the batteries never drain. It can run forever." We walked over to the tailgate of his truck, and he turned the device on. Sure enough, the meter reader was showing that the batteries were drained. We left the device running as we sat down in our chairs and talked. Suddenly, we heard loud and heavy-footed bipedal steps running from the woods to the back of the truck and then back again out into the woods. This was in the broad daylight of the morning hours. We couldn't see them running, but we most certainly could hear them running. After about 15 minutes of running, the inverter began to scream at us again. We walked over to the back of Steve's truck, and he turned off the device. We began to speculate why the batteries were draining. We reached the conclusion that the Bigfoot forest people probably didn't realize that they needed to only take the energy from the electromagnetic pulsating device while leaving the deep cycle marine batteries alone. Therefore, they were draining the batteries in the process of trying to create a shunt for the portal. Steve reminded both Mike and I that he had to return to his home in Washington so he could complete his job on time. He took great pride in always delivering his services in a timely manner, and he didn't want to jeopardize his reputation that he had established in his community. Mike and I totally understood. However, we were standing there with the realization that we just helped approximately 2,350 souls make it through the portal, and that was only 10% of everyone who needed to come through the portal. I asked Steve if he would please leave his device with Mike and I so we could complete the task of helping the Bigfoot forest people make it over from their world to our world. I told Steve that I would be coming up to Puyallup, Washington in a couple of days to celebrate the 4th of July weekend with Cynthia. Steve graciously allowed Mike and I to hang on to his device while he returned to Washington. After Steve left the Soya base camp, Mike and I devised a game plan to assure that we would complete the Exodus mission on our 4th night. We decided to drive back to Grants Pass, Oregon, and go to the AutoZone. We had Steve's 2 drained deep cycle marine batteries. I also owned a deep cycle marine battery. Mike decided to purchase 3 more deep cycle marine batteries, so we would have a total of 6 batteries. Then, if he wasn't already spending enough money, he purchased 6 battery chargers. Mr. Debugger spent around $600 in order to help complete the Exodus mission. Who's a totally sold-out believer now? Mike's commitment to the task was amazing. I love that guy. We drove to Grady's mother's home and set up the batteries in the garage and spent the entire day charging them. Mike and I went swimming with Grady and enjoyed the warm summer day. Then we ate an early dinner with Grady and his mother, Amanda. Although we are divorced, Amanda and I remain good friends. I felt compelled to ask Grady to join us in Soya on the 4th and final evening. I reminded him that he was there for the portal with Adam Davies and John Carlson. I told him that the Exodus in Soya was going to be even more meaningful, and I thought it was important for him to be there for that historic event too. Grady agreed to come along. When we reached the Soya base camp, I backed up my F-150 pickup truck into the cove area at the 12 o'clock position so the Bigfoot forest people wouldn't have to run as far to reach the electromagnetic pulsating machine. Right around the time that the sun was setting, we turned on the device. Immediately, we could hear the Bigfoot forest people running toward the device and then back into the woods. As the evening progressed, Zorth engaged in mind-speak with me. He told me, "We have managed to get 4,000 souls through during the first hour." I said, "How did you do that? That's almost twice as many per hour than you did last night." He replied, "We were standing by the 3 of you when you were talking about the batteries. We realized that we needed to only draw the energy from the machine and leave the batteries alone. Also, we were caught off guard by the success of the machine. We had no idea that it would work so well. So while you were gone during the day, we did a better job of organizing ourselves on this side of the portal. We also sent some of our people through to the other side to get everyone organized better so that they were waiting to come through the portal." While the evening of the Exodus was occurring, Grady said, "Dad, there's so many of them around us. I can see them everywhere. There are silhouettes, eye glow, and walking all over the place." Well, he was right. As the evening progressed, we had thousands of more souls showing up in Soya. The place was being overrun with Bigfoot forest people. Many of them stayed within their orb-like form. Eventually, Grady grew tired and wanted to go to bed. As always, he wanted me to tuck him into this sleeping bag. He climbed into his sleeping bag, and suddenly we both saw an orb by his legs. The orb moved slowly up his leg toward his waist and then zipped up into the air. It stayed about 10 feet above us before it finally zipped off into the trees. Grady said, "Dad, that was really cool." I agreed with Grady, gave him a kiss on the forehead, told him that I loved him, and said, "I hope you never forget this historic evening for as long as you live." Grady said, "I won't, Dad. I will always remember tonight." Mike and I continued to monitor the electromagnetic pulsating device. Occasionally, I would approach the back of the truck and say, "Okay, we're coming to check on the batteries. I need you to back away from the truck so we can take a look at the batteries." On one occasion, I literally saw 5 cloaked, shimmering images of the Bigfoot forest people back away from the truck. They ranged from 7 to 10 feet tall in height. The batteries checked out, and I told Zorth, "The batteries are still okay." Then I asked him, "How is the exodus coming along?" He replied, "We're still getting them through. It's going really well. Thank you." They were averaging about 4,000 souls per hour through the portal. Within 5.5 hours, we were able to help Zorth get all of his family and friends over from their dying homeworld to Earth. He told me, "Please don't shut down the machine yet. We still need to find just one more soul. He's very sick." I assured him that we would keep the device running until they found their friend. Finally, Zorth said, "We found him," and brought him over to Earth. Unfortunately, he died about a half hour later. However, they were happy because their friend was able to see Earth, and they were able to be with him when he died. All in all, when the exodus was done, Zorth informed me that we were able to bring over 23,542 souls. Out of the entire bunch, they lost 3 souls in the process. These 3 souls were older beings who were depriving themselves of the energy from their dying sun on their home world so the younger souls could survive. I forgot to mention that while the exodus was occurring, there were obviously more and more souls congregating in and around the Soya base camp. I was able to see red shimmering images about 3 feet by 3 feet that would float up to me. In the middle of these red shimmering images, I could see a feminine or a masculine face. I would hear them mind speak with me as they would all say, "Thank you." Then they would float away into the dark. Mike and I were honored to help so many souls come over to Earth. It wouldn't have been possible without Steve's electromagnetic pulsating device. Oh, and thank you, Nikola Tesla, for making the design that Steve used to create his device. The next morning when Grady and I woke up, Mike came walking back into the Soya base camp. He told me about how he was woken up early in the morning while Grady and I were still asleep. Apparently, the Bigfoot forest people wanted to address his skeptical debugging frame of mind. You see, even after everything that occurred, Mike was still having doubts as to whether or not everything really happened, or if he was blindly following a manipulator of the truth. Mike shared with me that as Grady and I were still sleeping, the Bigfoot forest people woke him up. As he lay on his sleeping cot in the dark of the morning hours, he heard a tree knock in the woods surrounding us. Then he heard another tree knock, then another. By the time the tree knocks were done, he counted a total of 12 tree knocks. He shared with Grady and I that he realized at that moment that they were speaking only to him to reassure him that the events of the previous 2 nights really did happen. Mike got up out of bed while Grady and I were still sleeping. He went for a walk on the logging road. He told me that he was laughing, skipping, and crying all at the same time. He realized that everything that we had experienced during the previous 2 nights really did happen. We really did sit in front of the Council of 12, and the Exodus really did happen. Mike was filled with enthusiasm and joy. He was finally in touch with his heart rather than being bogged down by his mind. I've known Mike for a few years, and it thrilled me to see him reach this monumental moment in his life. During those morning hours after the Exodus, Zorth mind spoke with me and said, "Thank you for helping us bring our family and friends over to Earth. All of you will receive a guardian for the rest of your lives as our appreciation for what you have done for our people." I thanked Zorth, and then I asked him, "Am I done? Am I free from my 16 years of compulsion? Can I go about my business without having to come out into the woods any longer?" Zorth responded, "Yes, you are free to do as you wish. However, we would still like you to consider being a teacher for our youth. Also, we would appreciate it if you would be our ambassador to the human race. You have much to teach others about us." What Zorth said next shocked me. He said, "By the way, on that day 16 years ago, that was me on the mountainside with your family. Welcome home. You are now free to write your book." Wow! Talk about a mind-blowing revelation. At that moment in time, I realized that Zorth and the Council of 12 had a game plan for me to follow for the past 16 years. Although I tearfully finally felt free to go on with my life, I knew that there was no way that I could deny their wishes to remain as a teacher to their youth, as well as an ambassador to teach humanity about the Bigfoot forest people. Before we left Soya that morning, Zorth told me, "Our lifespan is approximately 220 years. Some of us live less, and others live to be 300 years old. We live about 3 times longer than the human race does. Also, we travel the power line trails not because of the easy access or because the mammals follow the power line trail. We follow the power line trails so that we can partake of the energy from the power lines. Also, we do not eat mammals. We eat fish, eggs, birds, and vegetation. We do not eat mammals. It's the Trachon who eat the mammals." I asked, "Who are the Trachon?" Zorth replied, "The Trachon were brought to Earth a long time ago to mine it for its minerals. When the aliens were done mining the Earth, they left the Trachon behind. They're a vile species. They stand about 6 to 8 feet tall. They're menacing creatures and not very bright. They're the ones who eat the mammals and occasionally take humans in the forest. It's not us. We don't eat mammals, and we don't harm humans." Finally, I was joking as I asked Zorth, "What are you going to do now that the Exodus has occurred? Are you all going to fade into the woodwork?" Zorth chuckled and said, "Yes, we will continue to recharge in the trees. Also, we will not be as active in showing ourselves to the human race now that the Exodus has been completed. However, if kind-hearted people with good hearts and open minds reach out to us, then we will reach back to them. It is our hope to help improve humanity as well as their stewardship of the earth, one person at a time. Please share this message with others of your kind." As we drove away from Soya after that 4th night up on the mountain, I felt like my life's work had come to an end. 16 years of field research had just been concluded with the completion of the Exodus. Yet, on the other hand, I also felt like the next chapter with the Bigfoot Forest people was just beginning. The more that I learned, the more I realized what I didn't know. How could I give up on this adventure, even though at times I've wanted to move to Hawaii to get away from it all? With my luck, they're in Hawaii too. While driving down the mountains, Zorth said to me, "Remember, we are in the trees, and the trees are everywhere. Therefore, I ask those closest to me, Where are the squatches? They're in the trees. Where are the trees? They're everywhere. In short, you don't have to go deep into the forest to find the Bigfoot forest people because they can be in your backyard or city park. That's the end of chapter 25. And we move on now to chapter 26, A 50-Year Journey Come Full Circle. That's the name of the chapter. So stay tuned for more of Bigfoot, A 50-Year Journey Come Full Circle by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose.